We barely see Peeta's side of the story in Mockingjay, but the timeline holds clues. If we line up his capture, the interviews, and his final rescue, we can piece together what he endured. When did the torture start? Was he really safe at first? And how did he know about the bombing of District 13 before it happened? Let's break it down.
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
This is all based on Mockingjay book canon. Here's our rough timeline. We have Peeta's capture, his 3 television appearances, and his rescue, which all happens within about 6 weeks. Starting with Peeta's capture, he was in the Quarter Quell Arena having just slain Brutus when the force field went out. The District 13 hovercraft wasn't able to rescue him, Joanna, or Anabaria since they all still had their trackers in their arms and the Capitol was right on their tail, so he got left behind. And once Peeta was captured, he was briefly treated well and they prettied him up for his first of 3 broadcasts. I'm going to call them interviews here for simplicity. This first interview aired about a month after the Quarter Quell ended, but as Katniss learns, it was filmed much earlier. At this point, Peeta looks healthy to the point of robustness. His skin is glowing, flawless in that full body polish way. His manners composed, serious, hot. Obviously, this is a high stakes interview for the Capitol. They've given Peeta and Caesar guidelines, possibly a full-on script to follow on a prompter. They're trying to control the narrative of the rebellion, starting out by making the point that rebels interfered with the Quarter Quell, creating chaos. Peeta has been told off-screen about the rebel plan, or at least a version of it, and most likely he was given a blackmailish deal to follow his lines in the interview or else something bad would happen to Katniss and or his family. Peeta's family had already died in the bombing of District 12, but he doesn't know that yet. There's actually a deleted scene in Mockingjay Part 1 of Snow giving Peeta a talk about what he needs to do on camera for all of this, and I think it fits in really well with the story. The scene also starts out hilariously with Snow FaceTiming his granddaughter who has a crush on Peeta and wants to meet him like he's in One Direction.
Grandpa, can I meet him?
He isn't here yet, darling. And this is a business meeting. We'll arrange it for another time.
So cringy. Highly recommend watching it. Back to the book interview. Peeta has a long monologue describing what it was like in the arena, feeling like a trapped insect in steaming air, that giant clock ticking away your life, every hour promising some new horror, and how he expected to be dead by morning. Get back to that later. Reminder, the quell only lasted a few days. It ended on midnight of the 3rd. Peeta ends the monologue with, as bad as it makes you feel, you're going to have to do some killing, because in the arena you only get one wish, and it's very costly. It costs you your life, says Caesar. Oh no, it costs a lot more than your life. To murder innocent people, says Peeta, it costs everything you are. So good. Peeta is strategic with his words, and spending a long time painting a picture of what it feels like in the arena was an excellent way to get the audience on his side and sneaking in a way for people to sympathize with the rebels. A Capitol person watching this can hopefully get a grasp on the horrific truth of what it feels like to be a tribute in the games. Katniss notes how everyone is gripped by what Peeta is saying because no one has ever talked about what it's really like to be in the arena before. This is huge. He's saying this on a world stage. It's been forbidden to talk about. You're only allowed to talk about being in the games as this glorious thing if you're a victor. Snow is probably very unhappy with Peeta after this speech. He doesn't want Capitol folks to empathize with tributes or even see them as people. For the rest of the interview, Peeta is defending Katniss and saying how they both weren't in on the rebel conspiracy. He's basically pushing a narrative that he and Katniss aren't aligned with the rebels, which is what Snow wants, I assume. And then Peeta gives what seems like a Capitol scripted speech calling for a ceasefire, that the human race will go extinct if they keep fighting. The last thing Peeta says is, now why don't we ask the guards to take me back to my quarters so I can build another 100 card houses? I think Peeta is being truthful here, that up to this point, which I'm guessing is a couple of days since his capture, he really has been locked up in a normal living quarters and not been actively harmed. But after this interview was recorded, I think he was moved to the real prison. The Capitol just needed him to look good and be well enough to film. As always, Peeta is doing whatever he thinks would help protect Katniss the most, so he's complying with Snow's demands at the moment. 5 days later, the second interview airs, and it's clear Peeta has been going through hell. It seems like this interview was also pre-recorded, but made recently based on Peeta's physical decline. It aired right after a new propo of Katniss debuted, so it's unlikely the Capitol could have gotten a live interview set up that that fast, in my opinion at least. Katniss's propo was only aired in the districts, not on the public Capitol feed, but the bigwigs in the Capitol would have had access to whatever the district saw, so I think they were well aware of the propos. Katniss's description of Peeta in this interview breaks my heart. Peeta's physical transformation shocks me. The healthy, clear-eyed boy I saw a few days ago has lost at least 15 pounds and developed a nervous tremor in his hands. They've still got him groomed, but underneath the paint that cannot cover the bags under his eyes and the fine clothes that cannot conceal the pain he feels when he moves is a person badly damaged. How could they do such a thing to my son? But yeah, if it looks like he's lost that much weight, more than 5 days had to have passed between the first interview and the second. Katniss thinks so too. At this point, I don't think the Capitol has started hijacking him yet, just doing the typical torture stuff to break him down. They may not even have planned to hijack him yet, for all we know. I think at first the Capitol was trying to get information out of Peeta, figured out quickly he didn't know anything, but continued hurting him. Putting Peeta on camera for the world to see when it's clear he's being tormented is a deliberate choice, mainly as psychological warfare on Katniss. Snow wants to break her. She could see this and refuse to cooperate with the rebels, and she's worried about what will happen to Peeta. It's also possible they could be using this interview to lure Katniss in to go on a rescue mission for him so that the Capitol could capture her too. 13 is aware of how much this interview could impact Katniss's mental state. They were afraid that seeing Peeta's propo would make Katniss sick. Not that Coin or the main rebel leaders really care about Katniss's well-being, they just want her to be healthy enough to perform as the Mockingjay. The show must go on. In this second interview, Peeta continues saying that Katniss is being used by the rebels and she doesn't know what she's doing. It's a lot of the same as before. It sounds like he's following a Capitol script, in my opinion. He's prompted by Caesar to speak to Katniss if she's listening, and Peeta says, "Don't be a fool, Katniss. Think for yourself. They've turned you into a weapon that could be instrumental in the destruction of humanity." Great foreshadowing, saying that Katniss has been turned into a weapon, and then Peeta is the one turned into a weapon when he's hijacked. Bam. That line might literally have been written by the Capitol, or Peeta could have said that as a hint that he knew he was being turned into a weapon. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Peeta continues warning her to use her influence to stop the war and tells her to question if she can trust the rebels and to figure out what's really going on. This makes sense for the Capitol narrative, but I can also see Peeta specifically saying this because he is wary of the rebel leaders. He wants to remind Katniss that they were both treated like pawns in the Quarter Quell rebel plot. And he's right to be wary. I mean, we know that Coin was not the noble leader she presented herself as. She sucked. It seems like the Capitol didn't care that much about what he said in this interview. It was more about showing Peeta's deterioration to Katniss. I mean, he's literally told to address her directly. It's about her. 2 days later is Peeta's third and final interview, and this one is definitely aired live since they're having the whole propo fight. Peeta looks even worse here. He's fidgeting, sweating, and his eyes have an angry yet unfocused look, hinting that his hijacking has begun. Don't worry, I'll talk more about hijacking in a bit. Peeta has a white rose on his lapel and is on camera with President Snow here, I think as a way to remind Katniss he has Peeta in his clutches, and with Snow's signature white rose on him, it's like he's marking his territory. Snow leaves his stinky white roses around Katniss like a dog peeing on a rug. It's so gross and weird. Peeta continues talking about the ceasefire and noting specific damage that's happened, like fires and broken dams, and then Beetee overrides the Capitol feed with footage of Katniss at the rubble of the Mellark bakery. Peeta sees this footage, but when the camera is back on him, he's continuing with his scripted speech. Then there's this whole broadcast battle between Beetee and the Capitol. They keep switching back and forth with having control of the airwaves, and then Snow and Peeta are back on air for a decent amount of time, and Snow's fuming about everything, saying they'll resume the broadcast once things are secure, and asks if Peeta has any parting thoughts for Katniss Everdeen. Hearing her name does something weird to him. His face contorts in effort, which seems to mean he's fighting through the beginning stages of his hijacking, and he warns Katniss about the bombing of District 13. The book dialogue is way better than the movie, in my opinion. It's, "Katniss, how do you think this will end? What will be left? No one is safe. Not in the Capitol, not in the districts, and you, in 13, he inhales sharply as if fighting for air, his eyes look insane. Dead by morning. As Haymitch so helpfully said in the movie,
He's warning us. That was a warning.
I can't with that clip. Off camera, Snow orders, "End it." Peeta tries to say more, but then the camera filming him is knocked to the ground. You can hear Peeta take a hit, and his blood spatters on the white tiled floor. I hate it. So Peeta made the decision here to go rogue. As I said, he's always doing what he thinks best protects Katniss. Being willing to die for her is kind of his thing. This moment calls back to the boy with the bread story when Peeta purposely burned the bread so he could give it to 11-year-old Katniss who hadn't eaten anything in 3 days, knowing that his mom would beat him up for doing that. When he warned Katniss in this interview, he knows he'll certainly receive extra vicious punishment and or possibly be executed. And of course, this links to the Hanging Tree song, where the dead man called out for his love to flee. Peeta's the dead man, Katniss is his love. Tragically beautiful. So, how does Peeta know about this bombing plan? We never find out exactly, but it's implied that he overheard someone, maybe guards, talking about it. He could have heard them say something vague about Katniss not being a problem for much longer or something more specific. A theory that I like a lot is from a Peeta POV fanfiction, The Mutt by Igzy Grace. In it, Peeta's stylist, Portia, whispered what was going to happen in his ear when she was prepping him for this broadcast. She tells him that the Capitol had destroyed District 12, Katniss is in District 13 with the rebels, and that the Capitol is attacking 13 that night. I figure Portia would know this through the underground rebel network or have overheard it herself. I think that's super plausible, especially because Portia and the rest of the prep team were executed live on TV after Peeta was rescued, which happened about 6 days after that third interview. 13 retrieved Peeta from the Capitol along with Annie and Joanna. During those 6 days, Peeta was fully hijacked. I think the Capitol's overall plan for hijacking Peeta was to turn him into a Katniss killer, and then they'd either let 13 rescue him or bring Peeta there themselves, maybe as part of a fake plea deal hostage exchange thing, or just mysteriously drop Peeta off and then he'd be on the hunt for Katniss. They can be pretty crafty with it. Addressing a book-movie difference here. When Peeta is being rescued, there's this whole scene in Mockingjay Part 1 where Snow and Katniss are FaceTiming. She's trying to distract him from the mission. This is when Snow says the epic line,
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
That whole thing, including that line, never happened in the book. There's no Katniss Snow Zoom chats, and during the rescue, she's just with Finnick hanging out in the Hummingbird Meadow room, tying knots and panicking. Here's what the book tells us about hijacking. It's an uncommonly used type of fear conditioning meant to capture or seize someone's psyche. It's done by injecting them with Tracker Jacker venom, which comes from Capital Mutt wasps. Tracker Jacker stings cause extreme pain, swelling, fear-based hallucinations, and sometimes death. The venom targets the part of the brain that houses fear. In the aftermath of stings, people are confused and have trouble telling reality from illusion. Katniss was stung by them in the 74th games, and while she was under the venom's influence, Peeta warned her to run away before Cato came back. Sad tie-in there. I mean, he helped and protected her when she was venomed up, and then when Peeta's full of venom, he tried to kill her. BD explains more about the hijacking. Recall is made more difficult because memories can be changed, brought to the forefront of your mind, altered, and saved again in the revised form. Now imagine that I ask you to remember something, either with a verbal suggestion or by making you watch a tape of the event. And while that experience is refreshed, I give you a dose of Tracker Jacker venom. Not enough to induce a 3-day blackout, just enough to infuse the memory with fear and doubt. And that's what your brain puts in long-term storage. Basically, it's a way to change someone's memories into something terrifying. Peeta's mind was manipulated to see Katniss as a life-threatening danger, so he'd be compelled to attack her. The Capitol, unfortunately, had a ton of actual footage of Peeta and Katniss they could use during this process, some of which shows her literally killing people. They could also use technology to manipulate the footage and turn it into something else entirely. I'm about to say something from Sunrise on the Reaping, but it's not a spoiler. Someone says that AI imaging technology had been outlawed in Panem at some point, but even if it was, I'm sure the Capitol Torture Department could go above those laws and make whatever AI Katniss horror movies they desired. Peeta could have been injected with the venom and then put in a virtual reality chamber where they showed him this stuff for all we know. They could do some wild stuff. Peeta's best moments with Katniss would be heavily targeted in this, like footage of them kissing or cuddling could be morphed into Katniss attacking and hurting him. They ruined everything. But fortunately, love conquers all, even in Panem. Peeta basically had to detox from the venom. It stayed in his body for quite a while. Doctors in 13 did experimental rehabilitation to de-hijack Peeta, which was actually Prim's idea. 13-year-old Prim? That always felt a little ridiculous to me. I'm sorry. She came up with it? Come on. Doctors would bring up distorted memories he had of Katniss and then dose him with calming medicine. Like they showed him videos and things like that. It was a long process with plenty of ups and downs. Mostly it made Peeta confused since it gave him two sets of competing memories, leading to real or not real, which is like a therapeutic grounding tool for him. I have a whole video about real or not real if you want to dive deeper into it and possibly bawl your eyes out. But yeah, that about wraps things up for Peeta's time in the Capitol. I'm curious to know what you think Peeta went through during his capture. Do you agree with me or do you think something different? How do you think he knew about the 13 attack? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more Hunger Games analyses and do the thumbs up thing.